Good morning and welcome to everyone in the gallery joining us today, and people at home who are watching us live, and to those who wish to tune in later on our YouTube channel. Today is April 14th, 2026, meeting of the whole. I'd like to begin by acknowledging that we meet today on Indigenous peoples' traditional territories, homes of the Danze, the Aseniwichi Niya, the Aseniwuchi Winiwak, the Nehe Awak, Anishinaabe Sequemp, Ichith Kawachi Stebe, the Mountain Métis, and the Métis. Councillors, you have the agenda in front of you. Do I see any additions to the agenda today? CEO Gibbon.
Deputy Mayor Frechette, administration would like to request an addition to the agenda. It's in-camera matter related to a land issue. We'd recommend that there may be some action that would arise or that would need to come to the public agenda. So administration would like to request an addition, if council sees fit, of 7.7, land matter.
Thank you for that. Can I see an approval of the agenda, including the said amendment? Have a motion?
Thank you, Deputy Mayor Frechette. I would make a motion first that council amend the agenda for today's meeting to include item 7.7, an in-camera item related to a land matter.
Thank you for that. Any discussions regarding the motion? Councillor Melnick.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor Frechette. If we're going in camera, should we not do it after the rest of the agenda as opposed to make it 7.7? Should we make an in-camera addition as after item 10? Just point of clarity.
Thank you. If I can address that, thank you, Councillor Melton. My understanding from CAO Gibbon was that there is an anticipation that there will be a motion arising in open session afterwards. So I think it's preferred that it be part of new business so we can address it, then carry on with the rest of the agenda.
Thank you for that.
Any further discussions regarding the amendments? Seeing none, may I call a vote, please, on the question? All in favor? Opposed? Carried. Pardon me, Mayor Ireland?
Subject to any other motions to further amend the agenda, I'm prepared to make a motion that we approve the agenda for today's meeting as amended.
Any further discussion on the motion? All in favor? Opposed? That too is carried. Item 4, did we discuss that already? Item 4? Item 4. 3. Okay, item 3, the approval of the agenda. We did that. Sorry, pardon me. Item 4. March 24th, Committee of the Whole meeting minutes. Any business arising from the minutes? Councillor Hall.
Thank you very much, Deputy Mayor Frechette. No business arising, but I did notice, and I wasn't at this meeting, just around the skate park and the extra funding. And I've driven by it probably 6 times this week and it's packed full. And I just wanted to acknowledge how incredible that space is.
Thank you for that, Councillor Hall. Item 5, delegations. Oh, pardon me. Can I have any discussion regarding the motion? Item 4, the Committee of the Whole meeting minutes. No discussion? All in favor? Opposed? CEO Given? Right. Oh,
Deputy Mayor Fischette, apologies. This is one of the sort of confusing ways that we have these laid out. Our minutes from committee of the whole get approved at council, but then they come back at committee of the whole again. And so they don't need to be approved here. They get approved at the regular council meeting. Apologies for that confusion.
thank you for that, Director Given. Pardon me, CEO Given. Appreciate it. So indeed, now item 5, delegations.
Administration wasn't aware of any delegations, Deputy Mayor Fischette, but if there was any community member that wanted to come forward to council, this is an opportunity for them to address any matter that's on the agenda. As I look into the room, I think I see only members of administration here to speak to other items that are on the agenda, so I don't believe there are any delegations.
Thank you, CEO Given. I too see no delegations in the gallery today, so we will move on to item 6, correspondence.
Deputy Mayor Fischette, I can speak very briefly to this. You'll see attached to the agenda as item 6.1 a letter from the Insurance Bureau of Canada. This letter comes as a result of the Insurance Bureau being CC'd on the Mayor's correspondence to the provincial government and the Minister. In there, I think they outline what we generally understood is that the industry doesn't expect that there would be a blanket extension and that there is some action required on behalf of policyholders to request an extension for claims arising from the 2024 wildfire. This is here for information. At our previous meeting, Council highlighted a desire to increase public awareness of this coming deadline. Administration has undertaken some additional public promotion of the impending deadline through our social media channels. And so this is another reminder that there is a deadline coming up for those folks who have claims that are still outstanding from the 2024 wildfire. And administration simply presents it as a matter of correspondence.
Thank you for that, CEO Given. Any other discussion regarding the Mare Island?
As the letter from IBC indicates, it was in response to a letter that I sent at council direction to the Minister of Finance, Minister Horner, on March 17th. I have yet to hear back from the minister or the minister's office with respect to the matter. I have put a phone call into our MLA, Minister Long, recently. They went back into session yesterday, so I haven't heard from him. I hope that I'm able to. I would still like to receive a formal response from the government. There has been, I think, a guideline, it's called, issued by the Superintendent of Insurance. It's referenced in the letter from IBC, which is perhaps the strongest word you could use. It's a bit of encouragement to the industry to treat people fairly, which I think is the expectation in any event. So while we are getting some attention to the matter, it is not progressed to the point where I would like to see it land. And while IBC has taken its position, I am not inclined to accede to their view that there would be negative unintended consequences if there was a blanket exemption issued to all residents. I mean, this is in many ways not an unexpected delay at all. This is something that can be accepted in these unusual circumstances and has been accepted as an unusual circumstance in Slave Lake and Fort McMurray. So I am still hopeful that the minister might apply additional pressure both on the industry itself and perhaps through the Superintendent of Insurance to take steps that will in fact safeguard our residents, because the other side of this is the foreseeable negative consequences if somebody misses the limitation date. And those are extreme and weighed against any possibility of delay in rebuilding because of an exemption. I just don't see it. So I don't think the issue is nearly over. I credit administration for the message that has been put out both on our website and our Facebook page, alerting residents to the need to take action. But that doesn't, I think, stop us from continuing to work to get, if not a blanket exemption, then something that will cover everyone in the community who is going to be affected by this, whether or not they take separate action on their own, because there's still a risk that, given the circumstances, given the trauma, people will miss a deadline and then they will lose more than they have already lost. So I am simply suggesting that we accept this piece of correspondence as information, but continue to move forward with our advocacy efforts to government to take collective action on behalf of all of our residents.
Councillor Hall.
Thank you very much, Deputy Mayor Frechette. At yesterday's Recovery Advisory Committee meeting, we did ask the JRCC to reach out directly to residents who lost their homes in the fire, to remind them of this 2-year insurance window and to connect with their providers. We felt that could make a real difference in helping make sure nobody slips through the cracks, ends up in a tough spot.
Councillor Roger.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor Frechette. Yes, I was with Wendy yesterday at the meeting, and it was interesting. After the meeting, I was speaking to somebody in town that is a fairly prominent person here in town, and they didn't realize that even if they had received approval for the insurance company, if the money hadn't all been given to them by the date, that they could be at risk of the insurance company cutting them off. So I think there is a real lack of understanding, and I support that theory that we should send a letter, or Just Recovery should send a letter to each individual person that's on the tax roll, that was on the tax roll on July 22nd or 24th, and even to follow up after to make sure that they understand it, because it's a life-changing thing. If somebody does not get their insurance, it changes their life, and it also affects the town, because you've got a taxpayer there that's not going to build a house, and it's going to affect the revenue for the town as well. So I don't think we're just being nice here. I think it's important for the town and for the municipality as well as individuals.
Thank you, Councillor Roger. And I would echo those sentiments. I know on a personal level, I was very fortunate to have a very good relationship with my adjuster and with my insurance company. They were very empathetic and very forthright in the procedure. The payment was relatively swift. However, having said that, we did get contact from them a number of weeks ago, requesting a comfort letter from our contractor, giving us a succinct date as to when we will be able to occupy our home. So hearing the stories of people who have had challenges throughout, I would agree that people have to be proactive on their own behalf, as well as our input, to make sure they understand where they're going to lie, especially given that you may well be out of a home that is being paid for by the insurance policy. Now you may well be having to pay that yourself. So there's definitely going to be detrimental ramifications if we don't get some clarity on that going forward. Any other discussions, Mayor Ireland?
Thank you, Deputy Mayor Frechette. Just to speak more specifically to Councillor Rogers' suggestion of a letter to people who are on our tax roll. My concern is that not everyone who has suffered loss will have been a property owner, and so we are still bound to miss some. And once we take that direction, trying to notify everybody, we are still, I think, inevitably going to miss some. So there will be renters who had contents insurance and are entitled to alternate living expense claims, who are out of their property, but they will not be reflected on the tax roll. And I don't know how we find everybody, but if we take a step that we think is entirely inclusive and it's not, where does that leave us? So I am yet to be convinced that we improve our position by sending letters. We will certainly capture some, but we will miss others. And so are we better off just doing our own sort of blanket exercise by posting on our website and on our Facebook page and taking opportunities such as this in the public realm, and otherwise making people aware of the issue and encourage them to take action to protect themselves, but also encouraging government to take action to protect everybody. But a mail out will reach property owners who are registered on the tax roll, but it won't reach others who aren't in that same circumstance. And I'm not sure that that improves our position, particularly if somebody gets missed and then comes back and says, why didn't you tell me? You told everybody else, but you ignored me. And that puts us in a dangerous spot.
Councillor Roger.
Yes, we actually discussed that point yesterday, and the feeling was, I think, and I think it's true, that it's very unlikely that a renter is not going to resolve their matter within 2 years. But further to what you're saying, I don't think we have a responsibility to the world here. We can restrict our responsibility in our own minds to the taxpayers, and we don't have to go chasing after every renter because they're probably spread all over the place right now, and we shouldn't even try. So I don't see that adding to what is already happening creates a liability to us at all. If we just restrict our letters to taxpayers only and make it clear it's going to taxpayers only at the time of the fire, then I think we don't have to worry about renters, and we shouldn't be worrying about them because it's impossible.
Thank you, Councillor Roger. Any further discussion on the subject? Seeing none, would anyone have the appetite to make a motion on the position? To accept the correspondence?
Just
Councillor Malik.
Just for clarity, could we read the motion we're voting on? Because I'm a little fuzzy on what we're voting on.
Okay, fair enough. Yep, the discussion did take us off on a bit of a different path. The motion, as it is written, is the committee received the correspondence from the Insurance Bureau of Canada for information. Mayor Ireland.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor Burchett. Just as a point of order, what you have read is a recommendation from administration, but it's not yet a motion. I've yet to hear a motion that we can debate.
Yes, that's correct. I believe that was the question that Councillor Malnick had, what the motion, the recommendation was, and if a councillor would care to make a motion regarding the recommendation. Councillor Hall.
I would make the recommended motion to receive this correspondence from the IBC for information.
Any further discussion, debate on the motion as read? Seeing none, I'll call the question. All in favor? Opposed? Carried. Onward to item 7, new business. Item 7.1, 911 services debate. I believe Director Nadal is going to speak to that.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor Frechette. I am here to provide the 911 service update, and the recommendation for this report is that committee receive the 911 service update report for information. So we're bringing this before council to inform yourselves and the public of an upcoming change that administration is working on. And essentially, under the Alberta Emergency 911 Act, as well as the Canadian Radio, Television and Telecommunications Commission, CRTC is the common acronym, we as a local authority have a legislated obligation to enter into an agreement with a compliant service provider. And essentially what's happening is that the CRTC is changing the rules and is making the 911 call centers, the technical term for them is a public safety answering points. So where does the phone ring when someone calls 911? There are specific requirements for those call centers, and there is an upgrade that is now mandated for those centers to become compliant with. And essentially it's going from analog technology to digital. So it will allow for better integration across different systems for first responders, but also in terms of the callers getting a hold of the 911 call center. It's just becoming compliant with new technology. And so the municipality of Jasper, as well as Jasper National Park, are looking for a new provider that will be compliant with those provisions. And together in our discussions, we've identified that the Foothills Regional Emergency Services Commission, which operates Foothills Regional 911 call center, would be a good fit for both of our organizations to move to. This outfit already provides services for our counterparts down south. So Banff National Park, the town of Banff, Lake Louise, Crow's Nest Pass as well. So it is pretty common for municipalities to join a regional call center. So very few municipalities actually have a call center that they operate themselves, essentially. So Jasper would come in line with pretty much every other community in Alberta that has their 911 service where the phone rings when someone phones 911 to a regional center. And what we've committed to with our colleagues at Jasper National Park is that we would work together and move together to the same provider on the same timeline, so we don't end up in a situation where you phone 911 in Jasper National Park and it rings somewhere, and then you phone 911 from the town of Jasper and it rings somewhere else. Like, that's something we didn't want. So we're committed to working in that direction, and things are in order. The Foothills Regional 911 Center has been compliant with the new technology for some time. They've already integrated it. And there is no firm timeline on the actual migration of the service. That will be dependent on our efforts as well with Parks Canada to make sure that we can move it all at once, as I just described. And because this is a legislative service and there is no formal requirement for council to approve anything, we just wanted to be open and transparent about sharing that information with you and with the public. And therefore, that is why the recommendation in the report is that council receive the report for information. I'm happy to take any questions. Thank you.
Thank you, Director Nadon, for that report. Is there any questions from council to Director Nadon on the 911 update? Councillor Hall.
Thank you very much, Deputy Mayor Frechette. I'm wondering what will happen to the dispatch employees at Parks or that department.
Councillor or Deputy Mayor Frechette, through to Councillor Hall. I mean, it's an area of Parks Canada jurisdiction, so I'm a bit hesitant to speak to that. And also, dispatch is a different conversation than 911. So 911 is where the phone rings when someone calls 911. What happens after? So how does the call get handled and sent through to first responders? That's the dispatch part. And without speaking out of turn or for my colleagues at Parks, but I will say that Jasper Dispatch provides services for the entire country, essentially, for Parks Canada, and that the 911 call volume is actually a very small part of the work they do. So this change would influence their day-to-day, obviously, but my understanding is that there's no broad sweeping changes coming to Jasper Dispatch otherwise.
Thank you, Director Nadon. Any other questions for the Director? Mayor Ireland.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor Frechette, through you to Director Nadon. You've indicated in your request for decision that both the town of Banff and Banff National Park have been using this service provider. How long has that been the case, and are you aware of any issues arising from their use of this service in the Foothill service?
Deputy Mayor Frechette through to Mayor Ireland. I don't have exact data on that, again, a bit outside of our jurisdiction, but my understanding is that 911, the 911 service provided by Jasper National Park is the only one in the country that Parks Canada operates. So the town of Banff, or more appropriately, the Banff National Park Dispatch Center, never operated a 911 center. They always have been with a third-party provider. Now, I think they've been with Foothills for some time. Were they with someone else before? Maybe. Like I said, this would bring us into line with how every other community functions. Like having your 911 call center in your small town is very unusual, is not something that usually happens. Of course, there's some local knowledge and some local geographic, recognition of places that might help them be more effective at communicating that information to first responders. But this is not a challenge that is unique to Jasper, and one that Foothills is very used to providing in the context of a rural area around urbans, and specifically the national park context. And also because our geographic area adjoins immediately with another geographic area that they're already working in. It's the best fit we could find, really. So commitment from all parties involved to work together and ease the transition as much as we can. But of course, there will be some adaptation required. And in our timeline for transition, we are considering that, so we don't end up doing a transfer in the middle of summer, for example, where call volumes are high and it's not the right time to be doing that. So we've considered all that as part of our deliberations.
Thank you, Director Nadon. Any further questions for the Director? Okay, having seen none, would anyone care to make the motion that we receive the information from the Director for information? Councillor Melnick.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor Frechette. I would make the motion that committee receive the 911 service update for information.
Thank you. Any further debate on the motion? Seeing none, I'll call the question. All in favor? Opposed? That's carried. Article 7.2, Revised Water Services Bylaw. CEO Given.
Thanks very much, Deputy Mayor Frechette. Administration is here with a recommendation that committee recommend council give first and second reading to the revised water services bylaw. The municipality of Jasper has long had a bylaw regulating our water services. That's bylaw number 178. It was last updated in 2014, so it's certainly due for some updates. Administration has undertaken a comprehensive review of the bylaw. And overall, the proposed updated bylaw modernizes the regulatory framework for the municipality that governs our water services, aligns it with current provincial and federal regulatory standards, and improves clarity for administration and the general public. As I said, it is a very comprehensive update and wholesale rewrite and restructuring of the bylaw. Probably the easiest way for council to see the changes is the attached revisions to water services bylaw document, which highlights at a high level the changes. There are some general changes. The old bylaw had 32 different sections. Administration has simplified that and combined, so the new bylaw has 19 sections. And that revisions list provides a little bit more detail about some of the specific revisions that are proposed. Administration is happy to answer any questions that council might have. I'm joined by our utilities manager, Mr. Vidal Michaud, who can answer any other specifics that council might have. But overall, this is a modernization and update of the bylaw, recognizing the advanced age of our bylaw since 2014, bringing it into current practice, providing additional clarity for both the public and users and municipal administration. And administration is recommending that committee can feel confident in forwarding this bylaw to council for first and second reading. Happy to answer any questions.
Thank you, CEO Gibbon. Any questions for CEO Gibbon or Mr. Michaud regarding the presentation? Mayor Ireland.
Oh, thank you, Deputy Mayor Frechette. Through you to CAO Gibbon, I think I have a long list of specific questions, but my thought is that it would be best to give first reading, to have something on the table, and then ask questions before we give second reading. But if you would rather deal with them now, I'm happy to do that.
Deputy Mayor Frechette for Mayor Ireland. I think the practice that we've established is introducing bylaws for consideration at committee. And so that if there are substantive changes or long lists of changes or concerns, we can have that discussion at committee. And committee can either direct administration to take the bylaw away and revise it and come back, or if they are questions of clarification that don't lead to any change or minor changes, the committee could amend the bylaw and then forward it. So I think administration is happy to have the conversation here. If it turns out that it needs material work, committee might send us away to go and work on the bylaw and come back. If it turns out that there are small modifications or the bylaw is fine as is, then committee could recommend it forward to council for first and second reading. So I guess that is fire away.
Thank you, CEO Gibbon. Further questions?
Well, as I say, I have a relatively long list. I could start by firing away. Councillor Melnick also indicated that he had questions, but I can stop at any time and defer to somebody else. If I begin then at section 3.4, I just wonder whether we might add something there that we would give reasonable notice to the owner and to a tenant where practical or something. I mean, to shut off water is a serious issue. And as we just discussed with respect to the insurance matter, there are lots of people renting properties. And if the water's to be turned off and we have a way to notify the tenant, even if it's just posting on the door, I think that we might want to recognize some obligation to provide notice to tenants before we terminate water. With respect, just moving on, section 6.2 and 6.3, we have taken it upon ourselves to limit our own liability. Do we have legislative authority to do that? If our water service ruins something for somebody, we say that we're not responsible. I'd just like to know that we have the legislative authority to, in fact, limit our own liability in that way. With respect to section 8.1.3, I would just seek some confirmation whether or not this is a new provision or whether owners have always been obligated to pay for installations. And I'm thinking specifically now in the circumstances our community is in, with service installations required because of demolition, that we are not adding now an obligation on owners that wasn't pre-existing, because that seems that might be perceived as unfair by us to do that. 8.2.1.2, multi-unit residential buildings. I take it that would include anything with more than one unit. So a residential home with a basement suite, I guess, would be covered. There is no definition in the definition set of what a multi-unit dwelling would be. So I just wonder why we would first take the stance that you can only have one and the CAO would have to authorize more than one. If you have a suite in a home, would you not be, if you were prepared to pay for it, entitled to have two services? I don't quite understand what the purpose of that is. 8.2.2, I'm curious how the minimum frost penetration depth is determined and where that is published. So if you have to be below that and you have a builder installing your line, there has to be a source that they can turn to and figure out what that frost penetration depth is. And I just didn't see anything that would direct them. .4.4, I just seek an explanation for what is. Oh, no. Oh. What is meant there? It says where there is a reasonably foreseeable risk of damage to the water system, it implies that an owner can't take action. And yet if the damage hasn't yet arisen, I think we would encourage people, if there is a reasonable foreseeability of risk, that they should take action. So again, I'm just looking for an explanation for what is intended to be captured by that subsection. In section 9, 9.1.1, it says the municipality established a cross-connection control program. Are we establishing one pursuant to this bylaw, or has it already been established? I think it's just the tense there that has confused me. And in that same section, 9.1.2, I would just suggest that each of those might be subject to a phrase that says the most current version of either the National Plumbing Code, CSA B64 standards, or provincial government regulations. That is simply to show that it's a rolling matter, rather than set with whatever the legislation is today. Going down to 10.2, I take it, although it starts at 10.2.1, that nobody can operate a bleeder without written approval. And I'm not sure whether that is a change or consistent to what we have now. There is a later section that suggests that people with existing services are grandfathered. So maybe I don't have an issue at all, but it just seems not to accord with what we have. And I want to be assured that people who already have and require bleeders are not going to be both inconvenienced and offside the legislation if they don't have specific permission, and there's a requirement that they do it annually. And I'm not sure that that is the requirement now. If you've had a bleeder for years, I think you just turn it on at the relevant time and turn it off, and you get the credit, and no other action is required. And I think that that should be an expectation that is carried forward. Similarly, with respect to bleeders, section 10.4, there is a maximum discharge rate of 1 liter per minute. Again, I don't know whether that is the current charge. I mean, I know people get a credit for a bleeder. I'm just curious whether or not that is a change or just a repetition of the existing standard. in section 11.2, I wonder whether that could just be intended as a continuation of 11.1.4. So 11.1.4 deals with installation or relocation at the request of an owner. Otherwise, 11 deals with installation by the municipality, and we're the owners. And we choose where it goes, as I read 11.1.2. But 11.2 starts talking about the owner's responsibility to ensure that the piping remains protected from damage or freezing. And yet, we're the ones who are doing the installation. So I can see that we would put that liability on owners if it is installed or relocated at their request. But if it's our request, I don't see why. I mean, if not our request, but if it's our doing, I don't see why the liability for protecting the meter and the piping from damage or freezing becomes the responsibility of the owner, if in fact it goes where the municipality has determined. Moving on to 11.5.3. It says we can adjust water consumption records and bills based on meter testing or verification. So this is after the fact. If you jump forward to section 14.3, there seems to be an indication that we can only go back to the most recent billing. And I would like to know that there is some consistency there. So if somebody's been paying their bill for years and then there is a determination that the meter was not accurate, how far back can we go and require them to pay the difference? I'm happy with 14.3 that we can go back to the most recent billing, but if we can go back indefinitely, I see that as a problem. $11.8, again, an obligation on an owner to ensure shut-off valves, which I don't necessarily understand. But again, if we've installed the equipment, the meter and the valves, and it's entirely under our control, I don't know why the owner should become responsible. At 11.9.3, I'm just interested in whether or not replacement required due to damage by wildfire is something that is a responsibility of the owner. I'm not sure how that applies again to existing circumstances. And 14.3, I mentioned that earlier. The 3% is just interesting. I'm curious where that came from, but it doesn't. I'm happy with it. It's just a very precise number. And that is it. So just questions and concerns about a number of specific clauses that I have in the proposed bylaw. Thank you. I warned that it would be tedious.
Yes, thank you. We were warned. CEO Given, Mr. Michaud, the floor is yours.
Well, and subject to Mr. Michaud jumping up and down and saying, absolutely, I have an answer for every one of those right off the top of my head. My suggestion would be it might be most productive if there are other questions or comments. I know Councillor Melnick had his hand up previous. Maybe it would be best if Council raises any questions that they have. Administration would take the bylaw away and we can provide some commentary and context on the questions that have been raised by the mayor or any other questions raised by Council. I know I'm not in a position to answer in detail the context for all the different parts. We would maybe like to have Director Donaldson here. Some may be ones where we'd want to get comment from our legal counsel about why we've structured something a certain way. And others are technical questions. So we're happy to, I think, receive the questions. I know Vidal's been logging them as of I. We would take the bylaw away. We would provide a report back at a future committee meeting, providing answers or commentary on the questions that are raised. So let's get all the questions out on the table. The administration will record them. We'll take the bylaw away and come back with responses to all the questions.
Thank you, CEO Given. I believe Councillor Melnick had his hand up first there.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor Frechette, and to administration. Just to follow up on one of the points that was brought up, 8.2.2, the water services shall be installed below the minimum frost penetration depth as determined by the municipality. Is there any, the question I would have is there any determination that if that minimum frost penetration depth was incorrect, that the landowner would be covered? In other words, should there be subsequent problems with a bleeder being installed not far enough down, who is responsible? And I don't think I saw anything in the legislation other than it would be the responsibility of the leaseholder. So I'd like clarification on that. And the second thing is we're in the middle of a construction season. A bylaw here is about to be introduced. How well have we communicated the changes to the building community, to the current installation of buildings and the upcoming installation or building that is going to occur this season? We're doing changes for things like what has to go in underground, and we may not have communicated our changes to the construction industry, who are subsequently going to have to make changes in their planned construction. And that's my concern, is that we're looking at doing a bylaw. There are going to be properties that are 10% into construction, 30% in construction, 80% into construction, and it may be too late for them to comply with some of the points in this potential bylaw. So that's my question, is how will we address that?
Councillor Roger.
Actually, Ralph covered what I was going to ask, so I withdraw my question.
Very good. Any further? CEO Given.
Deputy Mayor Frechette, that's one, the last point raised by Councillor Melnick and maybe shared by Councillor Roger, is one that I will provide some comment on, and we can also follow up with more detail. As with any other bylaw of the municipality, the bylaw that's in place is the bylaw that everybody has to operate to. So if there are construction projects that are underway now, they would be operating under the guidelines or under the regulatory environment set up by the current bylaw. So the simple answer to that is, if you started under the current rules, you progress under the current rules. When there are new rules, then you'd have to abide by them. And so a project that was underway and passed a certain, past some of these steps would be operating under the bylaw that's currently in place, and nobody would be required to operate under a new bylaw or a new set of rules until it's finally approved by council after 3 readings and certification by parks. So which is, there's always a before and an after. There's the law that's in place now. And when that law changes, everybody has to comply to the new law after it's actually been formally, finalized and approved. I think the other question, though, that is embedded in your thought, or that you may have been leading to, is, have we consulted with industry on these proposed changes? And are we, giving them any heads up about things that they might want to be doing? And that's something I'd like to come back to you on. It wouldn't surprise me very much to learn that our Ops and Utilities team has been in regular contact with the construction industry and folks doing rebuild. I know that they are. We have a builders newsletter. We've had a number of builders forums. So I believe administration is doing that, but I'd be happy to come back with more details. The other big picture item would be that this is another example of Jasper's pre-fire status, where there wasn't a lot of new construction happening. And so, this bylaw, the offsite levy bylaw, and potentially a handful of others were probably fine because there was limited impact and limited ability to make a change. With the significant amount of reconstruction that's happening and new construction that's happening, obviously administration's identifying a number of areas where we should improve our regulatory systems, our laws that are governing how things are happening. They might not have been to put it simply, there might not have been a big problem before. And maybe we were dealing with things on a case-by-case basis. Post-wildfire, there's obviously greater need to ensure that we're meeting current standards, that we're consistent with approaches that you'd see in other municipalities. And so, that's why you're seeing a lot of things like the offsite levy bylaw, like the water services bylaw, and probably other ones where we have to look at our changed context after the wildfire and say, boy, we need to review how we're doing things to make sure we're doing it correctly, consistently, and consistent with other municipalities. And this is another example of that. So those are sort of high order comments. Happy to take away the question of how have we been communicating with industry and folks that are rebuilding about upcoming potential changes. We can bring back some more information on that for you, along with the other questions.
Thank you, that's CEO Given. Councillor Roger.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor Frechette, to Mr. Given. Just so I'm clear, Mr. Given, is it the date of the building permit, whatever bylaw is in effect, that date, you can build the whole building under that bylaw? Or if the bylaw changes halfway through, you then have to change to meet the new bylaw?
I see Director Sanders gave me the best look of recognition and ability to answer that question. Director Sanders.
Dr. Sanders, go ahead. Thank you.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor Frechette. The rules pertaining to a development permit, so the land use policy, when the permit is applied for, if the rules shift while a permit is in progress, then the rules of the day apply when the review happens. That's standard practice across Alberta. When it comes to safety code, those rules don't change very often. So when it comes to a building permit, the rules are the rules and they don't shift. This water services bylaw is talking about operational services. So that's a different topic. So just want to help with that distinction.
Yeah. And I'll say, we'll maybe take a little bit back, because appreciating the question about new service connections, there are some portions of the bylaw that deal with who's responsible for installing certain types of infrastructure. And I might need I would need some advice from the rest of the team about how we looked at that, about if somebody has been issued a development permit and a building permit by Parks Canada, and how does that building permit probably doesn't discuss the connection to the municipal utilities, other than needing municipal approval. So it's another example of where the coordination between parks and the municipality is pretty complex. I'm happy that you raised the question, and we'll take it back and come back to council with an answer on that.
Any other questions for CEO Given? Mr. Michaud, Mayor Ireland.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor Frechette. And if I may, I stopped my questions at the end of the bylaw and I forgot the schedules, and I just have one observation about Schedule B. And it just occurs to me that the penalty for interfering with a hydrant should at least be equal to the penalty for interfering with a black backflow preventer. So one is $1,000 fine and one is a $200 fine. And it seems to me that interfering with a hydrant could be a life and safety issue, and a $200 fine compared to a $1,000 fine for interfering with a backflow prevention device seems to me to be inordinate. Denunciation, I think, is an important part of setting penalties. It should be clear up front, in my view, that you can't go interfere with a hydrant. That could affect somebody's property. It could affect somebody's life. I just think there should be a higher fine for that.
Thank you, Mayor Ireland. We will indeed add that to your list. Is there any other questions on this topic? Now, we have before us, having seen none, we have before us a recommendation that, is it my understanding that we're going to move that to a later date?
So, Deputy Mayor Frechette, this is a good example of why we have alternatives in the council package. So with each report, you see a recommended action, but we also provide alternatives in case there are other things that arise at the committee. In this case, I'd suggest that the alternative that's presented that says committee direct administration revise the draft water services bylaw and return to a future committee of the whole meeting is probably the appropriate action. Appreciating that not every one of the questions raised was a revision. There are some that may lead to revisions, and certainly that alternative motion would give administration the latitude to answer the questions, come back, potentially make some revisions where the questions that are raised sort of lead to a potential revision. So you have a motion that's there. It's in the agenda package and the report, the RFD for 7.2. It is the last alternative that committee direct administration to revise the draft water services bylaw and return to a future committee of the whole meeting.
Thank you for that. So my understanding is we can still vote on the recommendation that's before us as written, or not?
No, that's what I'm saying, Deputy Mayor Frechette. The recommendation was under the assumption that council thought the bylaw was good to go, no changes needed, no questions, let's send it on to council. What we heard today was actually we have some questions and there's some potential revisions. And so my suggestion is that the motion in the sort of council agenda cheat sheet is probably not the one you want to make. Council should look at the RFD. There's an alternative motion there, and the alternative is one that would be for consideration or that a council member might wish to make.
Okay, Mayor Ireland.
I am happy to make the motion that committee direct administration to revise the draft water services bylaw and return to a future committee of the whole meeting.
Thank you, Mayor Ireland. Any debates, questions regarding the motion as presented? Councillor Melnick.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor Frechette. I think this was a healthy discussion and a lot of questions were brought up. This is an important bylaw. I am happy to see this going back to administration with the questions that we've had so that we can review it at a future meeting. I think it's most appropriate that we're doing that.
Thank you, Councillor Melnick. No further debate, discussion. I'll call the question then. All in favor? Opposed? That is carried. Okay, I've wondering if this isn't a good opportunity to take a 5-minute break. It's 10:30, 10:35. Is that acceptable? All right, we will break for 5 minutes. Welcome back. We will proceed now with item 7.3 on the agenda, wildfire utility repairs, water surface line valves. I think it's Mr. Olthoff.
Thank you very much, Deputy Mayor Frechette and committee. The matter before you today relates to wildfire utility repairs phase 1. Water service line valves. The recommendation is that committee recommend council amend the 2026 capital budget to include the wildfire affected utility repairs phase 1 project at a total budget of $2,015,000, funded through the Disaster Recovery Program to the tune of $1,505,000, and through Utility Capital Reserve to the tune of $510,000. We also present you alternatives that committee direct administration to address repairs on a case-by-case basis as needed, or that committee receive the report for information and take no further action. The background for this is that on September 2nd of 2025, Council adopted a Utilities Master Plan, which identified the need for water service line valve or curb stop replacements. A site tour was conducted on September 26th of 2025 and identified damage to curb stop valves on all properties in the Cabin Creek subdivision and approximately 90% of damaged properties in other wildfire impacted areas. So, the proposed funding supports repairs to wildfire-related damage in municipal water infrastructure in Cabin Creek, Lodgepole, and Miette neighborhoods. These repairs are required to restore full functionality of the water distribution system and ensure reliable service during ongoing community recovery. And where eligible, disaster recovery program funding will be utilized to offset costs associated with direct wildfire impacts, allowing the municipality to advance critical repairs while managing financial impacts. The curb stop service work proposed in this RFD represents phase 1 of a 2-phase utility repair program. And some more detail on those 2 phases. The first phase, as proposed here, is that as a result of firefighting, debris management, and utility replacement activities related to the 2024 wildfire, a large majority of curb stop service valves in fire-affected neighborhoods have been rendered damaged, inaccessible, or non-functional. Damage to valves and related infrastructure has increased operational risks and reduced the ability to isolate sections of the system during maintenance and emergency response. And while a number of curb stops have been replaced operationally to date, the remaining scope is too large to address within current operational capacity. Completing all of this work at once during the 2026 construction season will allow coordination with other reconstruction activities, will reduce duplication of effort, and limit additional excavation and disruption to newly built homes. An estimated 75% of this phase 1 work is expected to meet with DRP's direct damage eligibility criteria. Deferring the work to a future date has several significant impacts, including inflation of future costs, disruption to rebuild neighborhoods, loss of DRP eligibility for portions of the work, and a high risk of short-term failures. Now, with respect to phase 2 of this work, phase 2 addresses remaining fire-affected blocks, including 700 block of Connaught, 700, 800, and 900 blocks of Patricia, and the 800 block of Geeky. These areas require more comprehensive rehabilitation of aged sewer and water mains prior to reestablishment of services. Phase 2 work is expected to carry a total cost in the order of $7 million. Initial assessments indicate that a more substantial portion of this phase 2 work will not be eligible for DRP funding. Administration will return to a future meeting with a detailed phase 2, a report on phase 2 and a recommended funding strategy. So in summary, advancing phase 1 as a coordinated capital project will allow the municipality to address widespread infrastructure damage in a single construction window, improving efficiency, reducing impacts to recovering neighborhoods, and reducing impacts to recovering neighborhoods. The approach maximizes the available disaster recovery program funding, limits future cost escalation, reduces operational risk associated with system failures. Deferring or fragmenting the work would increase financial exposure and prolong service disruptions. This work aligns with several areas of strategic priority outlined in Council's recently adopted strategic priorities. It is consistent with restoring reliable water infrastructure for equitable access to all residents. It is relevant to the Utility Master Plan and the Jasper Recovery Framework. And to reiterate the financial impacts, the total cost of Phase 1 curb stop service valve replacement is $2,015,000, the majority to be expected to be funded through the DRP. expected municipal contribution of up to $510,000 is proposed to be funded through the utility reserve. The current projected end of 2026 balance for the MOJ's utility reserve is $3,159,918.62. The recommendation of committee would result in an end of year balance of $2,649,918.62. And in your package, there is a map outlining the affected areas, including showing which neighborhoods would be included in this phase 1 scope of work. With that, I'm very happy to answer whatever questions I can and to turn to my colleagues to my left if their expertise is required.
Thank you, Director Althoff, for your presentation. Councillors, any questions for Director? Councillor Roger.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor Frechette, and through you to Director Althoff. I was curious about the $7 million for phase 2 and the fact that most of it's ineligible for DRP funding. What exactly is it that we're doing? Is it replacing stuff that's been there for 50 years or something, or what is it?
Through you, Deputy Mayor Frechette, to Councillor Roger, that's essentially correct. The big difference between phase 1 and phase 2, in addition to being in different neighborhoods, is that phase 2 work includes rehabilitation of both sewer and water mains. That isn't required for the work in phase 1, given the different age and condition of the mains in those neighborhoods. And so the work required is considerably more intensive, including pipe bursting and cure-in-place lining of existing sewer lines. And because of the limitations of the direct damage provision in the DRP, that pipe bursting and cure-in-place lining of those mains is not expected to be eligible for DRP support.
Sorry. Follow-up question. Over what period of time would that $7 million need to be spent? Could it be spread over 5 years, let's say?
The objective in doing all of this work in relative short order is to minimize the cost associated with it and the disruption associated with the work. So the expectation or the recommendation is to proceed with the work in relatively short order. So in particular, to try and accomplish the replacement of the curb stop valves within the coming construction season, and with the additional work in terms of surfacing work, surface works to be concluded within a 1 to 2 year period. So not extending that far.
Okay, thank you.
CO Gibbon.
Yeah, Deputy Mayor Frechette, maybe I'll just speak in a little bit more detail, and I'll certainly want to raise that we need to make sure everybody's clear for, we're not dealing with phase 2. That is a bigger project, and we intend to bring a more detailed report forward for council on that. But to Councillor Rogers' question, the essence of phase 2 is that there are pipes that were not directly connected to houses. They were indirectly through the service line that goes to the property. And administration has identified a concern that putting new connections into these existing municipal main lines will cause problems with the main lines. And the team has had a detailed discussion with the DRP folks to say, well, look, we wouldn't have to be essentially punching new holes in these old pipes if it wasn't for the fire. We haven't had a lot of success with that argument to date. The province is working to identify if there might be other funding sources outside of DRP, and that's something that we're going to continue to chase to see if there are any alternate funding sources, and that's why we're not bringing anything forward to you today. But my greatest fear, and why we would want to proceed with phase 1 and phase 2 as quickly as possible, would be the risk of having somebody rebuilding their home, moving into their new home, and then having a failure in the municipal water or sewer lines damaging their newly constructed home. Like that would be my greatest sort of fear, is that damaging a number of newly reconstructed homes. It would just add to the trauma and complication of somebody who just reoccupied a property. So that's if there's a big picture thing that we're trying to address, is to ensure that we have infrastructure that is ready for newly reconstructed homes to connect to. This step 1, phase 1, we've had good conversation with DRP. They're going to cover the vast majority of the program. I'm thankful that we have utility capital reserves able to cover the balance. So there's no tax impact for this phase one. We had money in our savings because we've been building them up on the utility side for the last few years. Obviously, the $7 million is a very large amount that we don't have reserves to be able to cover, and that's why administration isn't recommending it at this time. We'll come back to you with some additional detail and a funding strategy for how we might be able to handle that. But the essence of this is, in both phases, we want to move forward with the construction as quickly as possible to ensure that we don't have a situation where somebody who's just rebuilt their home suffers damage to that rebuilt home from damaged municipal infrastructure.
Councillor Hall.
Thank you very much, Deputy Mayor Frechette. So my understanding is phase one is fire related. Makes sense. That's a bit more manageable. Phase two is just old infrastructure.
I guess so. We tried to make the case that this is all of this work is as a result of the 2024 wildfire. We were pretty successful with the things in phase one, the scope in phase one, and I will oversimplify this, and if I get it wrong, Doug or Vidal can correct me. We could make a pretty good case that the curb stops, which is actually not just the thing at the surface, but there's actually a box underneath that's related to that they were directly damaged in some cases because of the fire or because of the fire remediation efforts where somebody was clearing the property, the debris removal process. And so we were able to, I think, make the case that, hey, that's a very direct impact from the wildfire. But the other portion, phase two, there are these pipes that are in the roadway or in the alleyway that are going to start to have new connections attaching to them. And that's where a potential point of failure. The pipes are old. They probably needed replacement at some point in the future. And if it hadn't been for the fire, the municipality probably would have approached that over a longer period of time, just as sort of municipal asset renewal. Because of the fire, we're going to see a whole bunch of work impacting those old pipes. And we're going to have a whole bunch of new homes connecting to them. And so it's sort of becoming more urgent. We haven't been able to make the same case that this is a direct cause of the fire when those pipes likely needed to be replaced at some point in the future anyhow. But as you can see, that urgency comes from saying, well, we don't want entire neighborhoods of new homes connecting to aged infrastructure that could ultimately fail and cause a problem with those new homes. So it's not a direct fire impact, but it should be done now or very soon rather than later.
If I may, I guess this is the whole point of having a utility capital reserve. And I know you did sort of speak to it. We've had this reserve for a couple of years, or we've been focusing on it for a couple of years.
Deputy Mayor Frechette, that's correct. And I'm going from memory here, and Councillor Melnick will probably remember it because I think we talked about this at a previous meeting, but in 2022, the municipality had $500,000 or less in utility capital reserves. With the change to the utility rate model and the increased rates, to be very frank, the increased rates with a focus on capital, the municipality has been able to collect and add to our reserve because we knew that we had old infrastructure that would need to be replaced. I'm very thankful today, post-wildfire, that we've been doing that because we have this reserve, this savings account that we can call on to fund these utility capital repairs, some of which were unexpected, and thankfully we can get some other coverage for. But you can see how even the buildup from $500,000 of reserves to $3 million of reserves is pretty small in the context of the major utility repairs that we have in front of us. But I am thankful that we started that when we did.
We also took money out of the utility reserve recently for the piece at the water treatment plant, and that was like $1 million. I just forget how much that was.
Mr. Michaud is saying about 915,000. So there was a smaller portion that was 700,000 approximately of work that we awarded to contractor, but the overall project cost was about 900,000. And so yes, that's correct. We're drawing on this utility reserve in a number of instances. And again, the municipality is in relatively positive financial shape because we have the ability to draw on that because we built that up over time in advance of the wildfire and some of these urgent repairs that we're finding are needed now.
So we could potentially, I think this is unavoidable. I think we have to do this. we could potentially take out some debenture and then pay it back through that reserve?
So you're kind of reading ahead, Deputy Mayor Hall. So for phase two, at $7 million, that funding strategy obviously will be significantly different. It's beyond the capacity of our reserve, so we could choose to fund some of it through reserves using cash on hand. In essence, the money we have in our savings account wouldn't cover the whole bill, and so we may have to borrow for some of it. We may need to, we're going to continue to search out potential alternate grants that could cover some of it. And so that's why we're not recommending anything on it today. We're recommending the most urgent thing that we have the capacity to deal with, and that is largely funded by others. That's what we're recommending today. We need to do some more work on the larger project and bring that to you at a future point.
One more question. Are we able to use utility capital reserve to pay off debt?
Thanks. Sorry, I didn't clarify that. You sort of raised it before. The most likely thing would be any utility debenture would would be shown as an increase in rates in the future, because the rates would be high enough to support what is essentially an operational cost of a debt repayment over a period of time. And some of these assets would be completely appropriate. You put a new pipe in the ground and the expected lifespan of that pipe is probably greater than 40 years. And so it's not unreasonable to have a mortgage on that type of long-lived asset. And then all of the beneficiaries of that improved infrastructure, all the people that connect to that pipe over the next 30, 40 years would contribute to the cost of that pipe through their utility rates over time. So it's more of an operational expense if we chose to take that approach. And that's the type of detail that we provide to you when and if we bring forward phase two.
Just quickly,
Roger.
did I hear you say that only the people that would be using that pipe would pay for it, the utilities?
Sorry, I should clarify. So the beneficiaries, meaning the community, would pay for that in increased utility rates over the period of borrowing. So no, it wouldn't be like a local improvement levy, although that is another approach that the municipality could consider, where you take a local improvement and you identify how much of the benefit accrues to an individual property or an individual lease, and then essentially have a special levy, a special tax on those individual properties that have the most direct benefit, and some balance could be funded by the general tax base or through the general utility rates. Again, there are a few different approaches. I shouldn't have given the indication that individual properties would pay higher utility rates. All utility payers would pay higher utility rates to pay for any borrowing to fund utility infrastructure.
Councillor Constrid.
Yeah, just to comment to this, it's if I got the information right, it's pretty much a question that I was wondering anyways. If the homeowners are going to be digging up their lines, to me, it only makes sense that we do ours as well, for as far as disruption and tying in and asphalt and all the work. And I love a good deal. Getting that $1.5 million. Thank you.
Councillor Melnick.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor Burchett, and through you to administration, the $2,015,000. I'm sure there is a contingency built into that. Where is there a possibility that this project could come in under the $2 million mark?
Through you, Deputy Mayor Frechette, to Councillor Melnick, absolutely yes, there is a contingency built into that, both through the tendering process and the bid that was accepted, and our estimation of the overall cost. One of the processes involved in this work will be documenting each of the individual curb stop valves that need to be replaced and submitting that documentation to demonstrate direct damage to the DRP, and that will determine the extent of the funding. And so the 75% is a relatively conservative estimate of the amount that will be covered by DRP, which allows us, again, a contingency, and the expectation is that is a minimum level of coverage.
Thank you, and appreciate that. And I think it's worth noting that the DRP funding of $1.5 million, this is we still will be on the hook for 150,000 in our 10%. Once we go through the DRP funding, we still are going to have that we have to cover. I look to administration to make sure I'm clear on that.
Through you, Deputy Mayor Frechette, to Councillor Melnick, the same formula for DRP would apply to this funding as well. So you are correct in that matter.
Councillor Hall.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor Frechette. Is there any way to determine if we didn't do phase 2, what that $7 million number would turn into down the line, like how much more it would be?
Deputy Mayor Frechette, we can, when we bring forward the report, we can see if we can identify that. One thing that comes to mind, and I wouldn't expect Commissioner Michaud to know this off the top of my head, but you never know. The utility master plan looked at infrastructure that would need to be replaced over the long term. And so there may be some information in there that we could draw on because they provided some high level forecast costs for budgeting purposes. So we may have information on that, and we can see if we can include anything we do have or an estimate in the phase 2 report when it comes forward.
Mayor Ireland.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor Frechette, and through you to Director Olthoff. As I understand it, phase 1, so that is areas 1, 2, 3, is replacing curb stops only. Am I correct?
I'm going to look to my colleague to the left, but my understanding in reading the tender and the bids that came through is that it also includes the extension of sewage connections, so PVC piping in addition to the curb stop valves themselves and the protective boxes, so the assembly really around the curb stop valve.
All right, I confess my ignorance to stuff under the ground, but it's not the mains in any event. No mains will be replaced.
Sorry, through you, Deputy Mayor, to Mayor Ireland, that is correct. And the phase 1 work, there is no work related to the mains.
Okay. And I can understand areas 1 and 2 being distinct for a number of reasons. How is zone 3 different than zones 5, 6, and 7 in terms of the water mains that would have to be replaced? I mean, the Mayette area, as it's identified, zone 3, an older part of town. I'm just wondering how that zone 3 gets differentiated from everything else that is east and north of say, Willow Avenue.
Mr. Michaud.
Deputy Mayor Frechette to Mayor Ireland. That neighborhood, those 4 blocks were renewed in 2007 and 2008. So the infrastructure there is under 20 years old and of a quality that will last another 50, 60 years. So that's why.
Okay. And then for those other zones, 5, 6, and 7, in one of the alternative recommendations is to proceed by a case-by-case basis. Will we, at least with respect to the curb stop service valve, be required to proceed on a case-by-case basis? Anyway, as people rebuild, I take it that's something that you have to have, and so it's going to occur in any event, with or without impacts on the service main.
Through you, Deputy Mayor Frechette, to Mayor Ireland, that is correct. Given the reporting that we've had from engineering firms, the damage to curb stop valves is extensive, and replacement will be required. And operationally, some replacement has taken place in homes that have been rebuilt. So this is work that cannot be avoided. Again, making the distinction between the phase 1 work, which is strictly related to curb stop valves and assemblies in those identified neighborhoods, distinct from the broader scope of work in phase 2, including the work on the mains. But yes, broadly speaking, the work to replace the curb stop valve assemblies is required.
So for the phase 2 areas, zones 5, 6, and 7, who is paying the cost of replacement on a case-by-case basis for the same infrastructure? That is the curb stop service valve.
Deputy Mayor for Mayor Ireland, I think one of the challenges in this is that there are sort of overlapping issues across the zones. And so my understanding is that DRP had recognized very broadly that the curb stops were fire impacted or debris removal, and there's more direct connection. And so in the areas where curb stops are the only or sort of the easily identifiable one problem, let's say, like Cabin Creek or Zone 3, where the infrastructure that it's connecting to is newer, that's pretty clear cut and it was easy to make a case. I think that in zones 5, 6, and 7, there is also a need to do curb stops. And I don't know if Doug can speak to whether DRP's view of how we fund the curb stops in those zones. The problem is that we couldn't just say, well, let's replace curb stops everywhere because that's the same. Like we have different zones that needed different things. The areas identified for Zone 2 need curb stops and other things. And I don't know, Doug, if you can talk to whether there might be any DRP funding for curb stops in those other zones.
Yes, through Deputy Mayor Frechette to Mayor Ireland, to respond to CAO Given's question, yes, that is indeed the case. Our conversations with DRP officials, we were not able to get a commitment to a certain percentage of curb stop valves. It is, again, on a case-by-case basis where there will be a requirement to document the damage and to demonstrate that there was direct damage related to the wildfire. And to the extent that we can demonstrate that, those replacements of those curb stop valves in zones 5, 6, and 7 will be covered under the DRP.
Will be covered ultimately, and they can proceed on a case-by-case basis. So anybody that's rebuilding in those zones, even though we're not proceeding with phase 2, they will be treated the same as homeowners in the phase 1 area. That is, the curb stop, if it needs to be replaced, it will be replaced, and it won't be at the homeowner's expense.
Through Deputy Mayor Frechette to Mayor Ireland, again, that is correct. As has been the case in zones 1, 2, and 3, where it is required for the establishment of services on newly built homes, those curb stops have been replaced, not to the owner's expense.
And finally, what about Zone 4? Is there a plan? Is there a need for this work in Block S, and when might that ever happen?
Through you, Deputy Mayor Frechette to Mayor Ireland, the Zone 4, which is the Stan Wright S Block neighborhood, to my understanding, requires a different scope of work, a different level of intensity or thoroughness of work, and so has been excluded from this particular project. I would invite any further comment from my colleagues, but that's my understanding.
CAO Given.
Yeah, Deputy Mayor Frechette, I'll just, without speaking to the specifics, and that'd be Mr. Michaud, Zone 4, so the municipality has an overall utility master plan that looked at the condition of infrastructure across the whole town site in the fire affected areas and the rest of the areas of the town that weren't necessarily fire affected. And each area has very different characteristics. I think that there are some design issues with Zone 4 with S Block. So there's more significant work that is not directly fire related that's required there, and it's detailed in our utility master plan, which was adopted by council. Administration would bring forward recommendations from the utility master plan for the Zone 4 area or any other areas as a part of the regular budget process. I'll just look if there were situations where there was a curb stop valve that was damaged as a result of demolition or the wildfire. I believe we would have been submitting that to DRP for funding. I'm looking at Director Olthoff to see if that's the case.
That is the case, that we would submit that to DRP as well.
Thank you for that. I just wanted to confirm for leaseholders in S Block that they haven't been forgotten. They're not part of this scope of work, but they're part of the overall plan, and that issue will be addressed. So I just wanted that on the record. Thank you.
Any further questions from councillors regarding this issue? I myself just have one very brief question regarding the change out of the curb stop valves in the assembly. Is there any interruption is there any damage inflicted on our sidewalks when this is done, or the pavement, or is it done strictly within the easement portion of the property?
Thank you for the question, Deputy Mayor Frechette. That is the case, that the work will involve some damage to surface works and will require repair work to sidewalks as well. And that is covered in the project, in the scope of the project.
So sidewalk repair and whatnot is covered under the DRP project. Okay, because I do notice, and I don't know that this is the same issue that we've seen with the excavation work done with one of the new hotels on the West End, that we've in fact removed an entire sidewalk, it looks like to me. So that is part of the scope of this work?
That is correct.
Thank you for that. Any other questions from councillors? Mayor Ireland.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor Frechette. Just one further question with respect to the Phase 2 work. Overall estimate is $7 million. I won't hold anybody to that, kind of broad figures. But would it be fair to assume that proportionately, because the areas 1, 2, and 3 collectively about the same as 5, 6, 7, would it be fair to assume that proportionately we might expect the same amount to be fire-related damage, that is the curb stops, and so we'd be looking at, potentially another $2 million of DRP funding to go against that $7 million. So $5 million is main replacement, and $2 million might be the curb stops, and then of that, again, the same proportions: 1.5 million from DRP and 500,000 from reserves. Just generally speaking, is that kind of our best case proportional expectation?
Through you, Deputy Mayor Frechette, to Mayor Ireland, looking at the quotes we've received for the work in Phase 1, we can see that there are slight differences in the cost associated with curb stop valve replacements in different neighborhoods owing to local conditions or conditions in various sites. That said, the initial assessment of damage to the curb stop valves across town found that an estimated 90% of curb stops were damaged in fire-affected neighborhoods. So we can expect that figure roughly holds across damaged neighborhoods, with the specific per unit cost of installation varying slightly. So I would hesitate to put precise figures on it, but I think broadly speaking that is a reasonable assumption to work with.
Thank you, Director Olthoff. Any further questions? Having seen none, I believe we're looking for a motion on the issue. Any councillor care to make a motion on the topic, please? Mayor Ireland?
I will make a motion that committee recommend council amend the 2026 capital budget to include the wildfire affected utility repairs Phase 1 project at a total budget of $2,015,000, funded as follows: $1,505,000 from the disaster recovery program and $510,000 from utility capital reserves.
Thank you, Mayor Ireland. Any discussion, debate on the motion as read? Seeing none, I'll call the question. All in favor? Opposed? And that is carried. Item 7.4, Church Lands Memorandum of Understanding. CEO Gibbon.
Deputy Mayor Frechette, I'll just do a very brief introduction while Director Sanders comes to the table. As council knows, back in December, you directed administration to identify an opportunity to work with the Anglican and United Churches on the future of their two properties, which were destroyed in the wildfire. And then on January 13th, committee directed administration to prepare a memorandum of understanding with the Anglican and United Churches and return to a future meeting. So Director Sanders is here after having worked on that memorandum of understanding, and she can present the details of the report.
Welcome, Director Sanders. Nice to see you.
Good morning. Yes, I've spent some time with Ms. Anna Bubel, who's the representative of the Anglican Church and the United Church. She was on Zoom on the call, but she had a prior commitment at 11 o'clock this morning, so she's had to slip away from the meeting. Otherwise, she would have been here. Both of the churches, as you all know, have been faithfully serving the community of Jasper for over 100 years. And both congregations hope to leave a legacy to future generations as Jasper's rebuilding. And the essence of the Memorandum of Understanding is to begin a formal exploration that's non-binding to include or to create a multi-faith worship space on the two properties, a multi-purpose community space, and also housing in some fashion. And this particular request for decision is seeking your authorization for administration to enter into the MOU that is before you. And it's important to note, and I'm smiling as I say this is not a legal contract that is before you. It's a non-binding agreement between three parties, and any one of those parties can exit at any point in time. So this is really authorization for administration to begin to formally explore what could potentially happen on the site with us along with the two churches. So the purpose of the document is really to document a shared understanding and facilitate work towards common goals. So the contents of the MOU before you are pretty straightforward. There's a statement about purpose, project description, who the parties are, the roles, our shared purpose, and also next steps, which would involve creating what we're calling a term sheet. And if things progress much farther, then also potentially a land transfer agreement. All of these details have yet to be fleshed out. And of course, also in the MOU are just some simple words around decision making, the term of the MOU, that anyone can withdraw at any point in time. So the purpose of the MOU simply is to document how we intend to explore. And very simply, process-wise, just want to lay this out for you. Should you approve or direct administration to sign the MOU, we will continue to work with Ms. Bubel and the churches. And the next step of the work will be two things that happen more or less simultaneously. In the RFD, it's kind of looking linear, but they're very together. One would be community engagement, to simply ask the wider community about what are the possibilities for redevelopment at the site of the two churches and what's important to the community. But also behind the scenes would be the churches and the municipality preparing, again, what we're calling a term sheet, which is going to be all of the nitty-gritty of what potentially we could agree to should the site be redeveloped together. So who's going to do what exactly could happen there, how would financing look like, who's responsible for what, who's going to own or be the leaseholder over the course of time, and really get into, like, is something feasible? What is that? What are our options? When we get to a place where we have that content, the content, the plain language version of that content for a term sheet would come to council for approval, after which we will go and both parties, meaning the municipality and the churches, will go and engage legal counsel to prepare a document that would finalize what all of that is, should all three parties wish to proceed. So, and at that point, there'll be another approval of council. And very simply, what I would like to leave you with before I open this up to questions is community engagement is important. Having a conceptual design that helps assess conceptually an idea for what could happen on the property and whether it's economically, financially viable for the parties is important. And also a reminder to council that at many stages here, as has happened to date, will be in front of you for decision making. So this is not a financially implicating decision at this point in time. Administration can continue to work with the parties on the term sheet. And lastly, anything that involves financial decisions will be explicitly in front of council, both either as a tangible proposal for you to consider or through budget process. So with that, Deputy Mayor Frechette, I will open the floor to any questions that you or council members may have. Thank you very much.
Thank you for that. Thank you for that, Director Sanders. Any questions from councillors regarding Director Sanders' presentation? Councillor Roger.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor Frechette, and through you to Director. Just a small comment, but you might as well get it right at the beginning. It's not a land transfer; it's a lease assignment. So I think you should just change it throughout the document. We know what you mean, of course.
Thank you, Councillor Roger. Any other questions for Director Sanders? Mayor Ireland.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor Frechette, through you to Director Sanders. Thank you for your engagement with the other parties to this stage. My question is with respect to the potential contribution of municipal land to the project. So that the map that you've attached shows the Anglican Church property and the United Church property separated by what is now a couple of parking lots, but under municipal control. Is there an intent that there could be one parcel including that land so that whatever is built includes that?
Through you, Deputy Mayor Frechette, to Mayor Ireland. Yes, that is an option that's on the table. I also recognize that that's an important transportation corridor for pedestrians and bicycles. So that would be something that we would consider. But for sure, we can look at one site. We can look at one or the other, the whole thing in its entirety. All of that is on the table as we explore.
I appreciate that. I just wonder whether when contributions are identified in the MOU, whether there might be a signal that the municipality may also contribute some land to the overall project, just so it's clear. And again, you've emphasized that this is not a legal document, despite the fact that it sort of looks like one. And I'm just thinking, in terms of the term, and you're going to come up with a term sheet which is different, but the term item 8 in the MOU suggests that the MOU comes to an end at the end of this year. And I just wonder whether you might add a clause that says, unless otherwise mutually agreed by the parties. I appreciate that we'd like this thing to move forward, but unexpected things like wildfires can happen and things get delayed. And so I don't want anybody to suppose that if we don't have a resolution by the end of this calendar year, this thing it just comes to an end. So it would be easy, I think, to address that. I had one further question, perhaps best directed to you, Mr. Given. And I appreciate the work that has gone into this, and previously council directed that administration work with these church groups to get to this stage. Obviously, considerable work has been done and considerable more work will be done once the MOU is signed, assuming that committee gives that direction. It appears to have fallen into the lap of Director Sanders primarily. I'm wondering, Mr. Given, if we didn't have a director of urban standards and design, or urban design and standards, whatever way that goes, where would this task have fallen?
Deputy Mayor Frechette for Mayor Ireland. So, I mean, the very simple answer would be with somebody else. And so that somebody else likely would have been me through the process of, and this is what we're seeing here in this work product arriving in front of council isn't the only step. The churches have been meeting, the congregations have been meeting with their consultant over a number of months. Director Sanders and our housing manager, Ms. Pelletier, have both been attending those meetings on a regular basis. I've only attended once. And in terms of the development of the MOU and the discussion back and forth with the representative of the churches, that's all been Director Sanders. And so the short answer is it would have landed on my desk. And I would have had to figure out how to handle that with all the other items that are coming through. I might have relied on Ms. Pelletier, but she's also in the midst of building the Connaught affordable housing project, below market housing project, as you'll see with our upcoming item. And so the short answer is we would have had to figure it out using existing resources.
Thank you, CEO Gibbon. Any more questions?
If I could just follow up, going forward, depending on what may came out of the, say, the terms that are going to be developed, I take it that there is likely to be a need for discussions, consultation, perhaps negotiation with Parks Canada. And would it be fair to say that as between the municipality and the churches, we would expect to take the lead on that? So thinking forward about the components of whatever this project might be, which could include a housing component and mixed use of a large parcel of land, I take it it would be an expectation that there will be issues to resolve with Parks Canada. And would we anticipate that we would take the lead on that?
Deputy Mayor Frechette, to you, Mayor Ireland. I think the answer to the question depends on what the conceptual design is at the end of the day. So if it completely conforms with the land use policy, it's simply a development proposal. If the community and the parties want to do something that requires an amendment to the land use policy, then that's going to be a much different scenario. But because I bring what I bring as a planner and my teammates, we can have a discussion with Parks Canada and support them in their ultimate decision making, because they will have the final authority. But we'll be able to, along with the churches, decide what is the best thing that is economically viable to do in the community, and then advocate for it as needed. And depending on what we end up proposing, we might not need to. It might be simply a development proposal, and then we have to go and figure out how to do it. But the land use policy approvals could be straightforward. And it's also possible we might want to do something or find it's more economically viable with an amendment to the land use policy, and that would be a different scenario. We don't know which scenario we're looking at yet. It's early days.
Thank you.
Any further questions for Director Sanders? Okay, I would just have a comment. We did have an opportunity to meet with members of both denominations a while back, a number of councillors and Mayor Ireland. And clearly, I think this presents a wonderful opportunity going forward for possibly a number of issues in terms of additional housing for seniors, a lifestyle that would allow them to move from their homes into a space that would give them the freedom of movement. Location is ideal in terms of center of town. It would be my hope that the whatever plan comes forward, it's fleshed out to tick off as many of the boxes as we can. Further to that, I do have one question. Do we know, are these properties owned by the denominations locally, or are they owned by the churches outside of the community?
Deputy Mayor Frechette, it's my understanding that it is the larger church organization that is the leaseholder, and they are obviously in regular discussion with the congregation. So you'll notice the parties are defined in the MOU as the Synod of the Diocese of Edmonton, which is the Anglican Church, and the United Church of Canada.
Okay, so there is, down the road, when it does come to the discussion about cost, they may well be a party to this in terms of the financing piece.
Yes, Deputy Mayor Frechette, that will all be sorted out as we explore further.
Okay, thank you for that clarity, Director Sanders. Do we have any more questions? Having seen no hands, would anyone care to make the motion to accept Councillor Roger?
Thank you, Deputy Mayor Frechette. I would make the motion that the committee direct administration enter into the memorandum of understanding as proposed with the correction of the transfer of land to assignment of lease.
Thank you, Councillor Roger. Any discussion on the motion? Seeing none, I'll call the question. All in favor? Opposed? That is carried. Item 7.5, JMHC Connaught below market housing loan guarantee bylaw. So you have Ms. Belcher.
Deputy Mayor Frechette, I'll do the buying time while Ms. Peltier gets herself set up, and I can introduce the RFD very briefly. Administration is here with respect to providing a loan guarantee that's required by CMHC for the Connaught below market housing project. Ms. Peltier will cover the details, but you'll see in the report that this is consistent with an approach the municipalities previously taken to provide support for the Caribou Creek co-op developments. But I'll turn it over to Ms. Peltier to introduce the recommendation in the report.
Welcome, Ms. Peltier.
Morning, thank you. Today I will be speaking to the request for decision regarding the Jasper Municipal Housing Corporation loan guarantee bylaw. The recommendation before committee today is that the bylaw go to council for first and second reading at the April 21st meeting. This bylaw would authorize the municipality to act as guarantor for the JMHC in order to secure CMHC financing for the Connaught below market housing development. The bylaw has been reviewed by JMHC's legal counsel to ensure compliance with the MGA and CMHC loan documents. In terms of legislation and precedent, this is not a new approach for the municipality. Council has previously acted as a guarantor to support community housing, most notably in 2012 with the Caribou Creek Housing Cooperative. This bylaw is consistent with the approach taken to support that development. In this instance, CMHC has conditionally approved funding of approximately $14.2 million, made up of a $5 million forgivable loan and $9.2 million repayable loan. As part of their securities agreement, CMHC requires the municipality to guarantee both portions of the loan. CMHC is prepared to release the full $5 million forgivable loan portion of funding when a guarantee is in place. The guarantee is a time-limited commitment. It remains in place only until the project reaches stabilization, which is defined by CMHC as 12 consecutive months of successful operations at the target revenue level. Proformas and financial analysis anticipate full occupancy and reaching target revenues upon opening, allowing the guarantee to be removed 12 months later at or around January 2028. From a financial perspective, there is no upfront cost to the municipality. However, the guarantee does create a contingent liability. That means that the municipality would only be at risk if the borrower were unable to meet its obligations. Under the Municipal Government Act, this guarantee would count toward the municipality's debt limit and municipalities are required to remain within their legislated debt capacity. Even with the addition of the Connaught Development Guarantee, Jasper remains well within that limit. As of the end of 2024, the municipality had over 64 million in available capacity. If the guarantee is not approved, the JMHC would need to pursue alternative financing, which may not be available on comparable terms. There is also a risk of losing the $5 million forgivable loan, which could delay or jeopardize the project. In summary, the municipality, acting as a guarantor, is a requirement as per CMHC, is consistent with past practice, and has a limited time term. For those reasons, administration is recommending that committee support the bylaw moving forward to council. Thank you, and I'm happy to answer any questions.
Thank you, Ms. Belcher, for your presentation. Any questions from councillors? Councillor Roger.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor Frechette, and through you to Ms. Pelche. My only question is about the interest rate. Are we subject to fluctuations, or are we guaranteed this rate for a length of time long enough?
There is a threshold, through you, Deputy Mayor Frechette, to Councillor Roger. There is a threshold interest rate of 4.58% in the CMHC loan documents. That would be the highest rate. We are still negotiating our term for the loan, which would be in place for 10 to 20 years. And we anticipate it actually being lower than that 4.58%.
If world rates go up due to all the conflicts out there, are we still covered, or could that possibly change? I notice the bylaw sets that as a limit, the 4.58.
For the length of the term, whether that be 10 or 20 years, comparable to a regular house mortgage of 5 or 10 years, and then you would go and renegotiate with the bank.
CEO Gibbon.
Sorry, Deputy Mayor Frechette, maybe just to clarify. So for the purpose of the loan guarantee, the maximum interest rate is that 4.58%. And so for the expected term of the loan guarantee, which is, as Ms. Pelche said, out to about 2028, it would not be able to go above that 4.58%. And we expect, in fact, that it will be lower. So it does set that maximum threshold of exposure for the municipality during the term of the loan guarantee.
I guess my question was that if for example, the prime interest rate goes up by a large amount, are we guaranteed the rate that we've negotiated with CMHC no matter what happens out there in the world?
Yes, that's correct.
Thank you.
Mayor Ireland.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor Frechette, through you to Ms. Pelche. I recognize that this is something that has to get done, and I appreciate that you brought it to us. The money is there, the building's in the ground. And it falls to a municipally controlled corporation in any event. I'm just wondering about the terms of the bylaw for funding sources, which are slightly different than what was in the previous bylaw where we guaranteed an indebtedness for Caribou Creek. In that case, we specifically mentioned that if we are ever called upon in the guarantee, we would repay those monies first from rental income from units, and then from operational budget of the municipality if we had to. In this case, that first term has been not included. And I take it that whether or not it's included, we as the municipality could, if we were called on the guarantee, collect the rents from the units to help repay the debt. And I'm just curious why that clause isn't included in the bylaw, whether it was just overlooked or whether there was a reason not to include it, given our relationship with the JMHC.
CEO Gibbon.
Deputy Mayor Frechette, for Mayor Ireland, I think this is a case of removing things that are sort of duplicative. So the municipality absolutely could do that. What you proposed, the rents, if the municipality had to take over the project, the municipality could absolutely make the indebtedness, the payments, cover the payments required through the rents. The way that it's framed in 5.1 under funding sources gives the municipality very broad latitude. So rather than providing one part that's very restrictive and then a second point that's broader, the broader point will do because it covers both instances. So if the municipality wanted to fund it through general property tax revenue, if we wanted to fund it through rental payments, if we wanted to fund it through other grants that we'd receive, we have ultimate flexibility to do that rather than speaking to one specific type of path to funding it while excluding others.
Thank you for that. And it's all limited in time in any event. Once the project reaches stabilization, the guarantee disappears, correct?
That's correct, Mayor Ireland.
Councillor Melnick.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor Frechette, and through you to administration. So the $9.2 million is a mortgage that's going to be assumed by the CMHC. And we're only providing a loan guarantee until January of 2028. But the CMHC will be responsible for repaying the mortgage over 10 or 20 years. Am I understanding that correctly, or have I got that somehow wrong?
Thank you, Deputy Mayor Frechette, through you to Councillor Melnick. So the $5 million is a forgivable loan as long as we keep to the terms of our agreement. We don't have to worry about that. The $9.2 million would be a mortgage assumed by the JMHC and guaranteed by the municipality. At the end of the term of the mortgage, there would be nothing left owing. All of the mortgage payments would be paid by the JMHC through the operating revenue of the building. This is showing viable in our pro formas, and actually there is some revenue left over at the end of every year for that.
If I might continue, the municipality has a debt limit. We're going to be using part of that debt limit until January of 2028, at which time that loan guarantee will have that $9 million available to the municipality for other funding. That's where my point is going with this, is we're doing a short-term guarantee, and in the longer term, we'll still have the availability of funding for municipal projects, i.e. the $7 million in phase 2.
CEO Given.
Deputy Mayor Frechette, yeah. So, Councillor Malik, you've got it right. And so, in essence, the municipality has a total amount of potential debt capacity. We need to recognize that this loan guarantee might call on the need to use that debt capacity. And so we need to sort of acknowledge that hold on some portion of our debt capacity for the term that the loan guarantee is in place. Administration, our analysis shows that we expect that that'll happen very, very quickly as occupancy ramps up. Our pro formas and forecasts for the project show that likely within the first 12 months we'll meet stabilization. And once we meet stabilization, then that hold on our debt capacity is removed, and the municipality has access to that room, borrowing room again.
Thank you for that. Appreciate it.
Any further questions from Ms. Pelche or CEO Given on the topic? Okay, having seen none, would anyone care to make a motion? Mayor Ireland?
Thank you, Deputy Mayor Frechette. I'm, in fact, very happy to make a motion that committee recommend council give first and second reading to the Jasper Municipal Housing Corporation Connaught below market housing loan guarantee bylaw.
Thank you for that, Mayor Ireland. Any discussion regarding the motion? Seeing none, I'll call the question. All in favor? Opposed? That is carried. Thank you, Ms. Belcher. We'll move on to item 7.6. This is I guess a discussion regarding the Townsite open space and trails plans that it's been brought to my attention that this document, which was prepared for the municipality back in 2003 by a company called Gibbs and Brown Landscape Architects Limited, was put together with the idea and the recommendations by past councillors that we would have a comprehensive and cohesive plan for our municipal town trails and green spaces. This document had a three-phase process to it. The early stage, the middle stage, and the final stage, which came to a conclusion and as of 2025. So this document, as we have it today, is now defunct and out of date. And having an opportunity to go through it, there are many, there are a number of projects that were realized and indeed accomplished. An example of that would be the berm along Connaught Drive and the trees that were planted to give a shielding from the CN yard and all the activity that goes on there. However, there are a number of really good quality projects that, for whatever reason, were never realized. And of course, now we are looking at a number of projects that really could benefit from some sort of steering document that will help us use as a tool to look at and refresh our trail systems inside the community, our green spaces, how they're used, the accessibility of use, a myriad of things that were all covered off in this document, and unfortunately, a good many of them were not realized. And my involvement with the Community in Bloom committee, we're now starting to really focus on a lot of these projects that are really going to enhance and lend to usability and desirability, if you will, to all of these green spaces in our trail systems. This would go hand in hand not only with the trails, but also with street architecture, which is now being reviewed and implemented through Director Sanders' department and Director Donaldson's department, that could really benefit from a document such as this. So, in keeping with the history here, I would like to see that this document be updated and presented, and the direct the administration to do just that. I don't know what that would entail in terms of what had to be changed or added. Clearly, we have had some changes in our community since this was prepared. For instance, we now have a transit system. There's no mention, really, there is a mention of transit systems, but just on the peripheral. I think we're putting a lot of our focus on it, and I think that that may be something that in a new document, if it were to be prepared, that would identify and make some presentations as to how we can really focus on all of these pieces that were identified some 25 years ago. So I don't know what that would entail. I guess on the upside is the gentleman who prepared this is now employed by McElhaney in Hinton, And we've had discussion with him at our last Community in Bloom meeting that he would be more than willing to join us either in person or via Zoom, if indeed we feel that the committee feels that this is something that would be beneficial for not just the Community in Bloom efforts, but I think just generally. So we have a big project projects identified that certainly could be a benefit to the community going forward. So having said that, I would invite discussion if councillors have any discussion or any feelings on the issue. I'd be delighted to hear them and see what your thoughts are. Councillor Melnick.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor Frechette. I see you have a printed copy of the report. Is there an electronic copy that could be forwarded to councillors to review, or is it on our website?
Yes, we have sent out this copy electronically, I believe, through our members of the Community in Bloom. If not, I'm sure we can get it. I mean, Director Gibbon, our CEO Gibbon, may have access to this document electronically. I know that this was furnished to me by Mr. Gibbon. So, and I'm delighted you've asked that, because I think you'll find it quite an interesting read and very comprehensive. All the parties involved have participated in this, and I think it would be very insightful for everyone to have a chance to go through it. Councillor Hall.
Thank you very much, Deputy Mayor Frechette. I think this is really important. I'm also curious if this is work that's already happening. I see Director Sanders is at the mic. I'm just wondering if you could speak to this as we rebuild.
Director Sanders.
Yes, Deputy Mayor Frechette to Councillor Hall. There are a lot of things that have our attention, and in the municipal planning world, the ideal magical way would be to have the equivalent of a community sustainability plan, which paints the big picture. I like to think of it as a big umbrella that lays out the vision for the community, under which there's a whole bunch of other plans, one of which this would be an example. So typically in municipalities, there's always some push and pull. Do you update the big plan and then update all the others, or do you update the others and then update the bigger one? So the short answer is we don't have it in our work plan right now to do. That doesn't mean it's not a valuable thing to do. So perhaps a takeaway for administration would simply be, if you have a clear idea of what it is you're looking for, we can go away and figure out what it would take to do it. In the short term, we're keeping our eyes on a whole bunch of things all at the same time, so that when we're making choices while we're rebuilding, we're in alignment with something. So there are good bones in that report, for example, in that plan. So there's good guidance in there. Could it be updated? There's no question, but there's other maybe more informal ways we can be doing things before we undertake to do the big version of it. My recommendation at this point in time to council, and I haven't thought this through really well, but would be to put our energy on having the updated plan, the replacement of the community sustainability plan, because it dates back to 2011. And other municipalities would have updated it a couple of times by now. So that to me feels like it's more, it's not that it's more important, but it's going to be more helpful to the community when we're looking at a whole bunch of other things that need to be updated. And there are many.
Mayor Ireland.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor Frechette. And to avoid you being required to relinquish the chair to make a motion, I'll see if I can channel where I think you are going. And cognizant of Councillor Melnick's inquiry, I would propose a motion that committee direct administration to circulate the existing 2003 green space vision plan, is that what it is? To all of council and have this matter returned to a future committee of the whole meeting. And at that time, that would be the motion. And speaking to the motion, at that time, we will all have had an opportunity to review this particular document. We can review other documents as we choose, including the Community Sustainability Plan, which is a very long document, and have further discussions about whether or not we want to task administration with work related to this specific plan, the renewal, say, of the green space plan, or incorporate it into something else. But I think it's important that council have the documents before them so they can have a better understanding of the topic. So I'm suggesting that it just come back at a future time with a little more information, and then we can have this discussion again.
Thank you, Mayor Ireland. I agree with that. I think there's a lot of things in this package here now that I think we don't need to reinvent the wheel. I do think that there are many valuables to the tool that we have here now. I realize it's beyond its good before date, but I think we being the Community in Bloom Committee specifically, on projects that we are earmarking for this season, that we can get some guidance from, which was considered to be a viable projects back in the day. I mean, it is only 2026. It is out of date, but we're not talking cottage cheese here. So I think that we can still use the tool as it is here now, but I appreciate that all of my fellow councillors should have the opportunity to see it. And I think you'll find it to be quite enlightening and very well fleshed out. So having said that, Mayor Ireland, I assume that the motion would you care to make the motion? Okay, you made the motion. Okay, any discussion on the motion? Okay, having seen none, I'll call the question. All in favor? Opposed? That'll be carried. Proceeding to item 7.7, I believe we have an in-camera issue.
I would make the motion that at 11:59, council move in camera to address item 7.7, land matter, on our agenda.
Thank you, Councillor Melnick. Any discussion regarding the motion? Seeing none, all in favor? Opposed? That's carried. We'll move in camera. Sorry, Mayor Ireland.
Just before we leave, move in camera, I'd just like to confirm for those who may be watching live that I take it that the existing link will remain active, and we will simply adjourn. And when we come back, those who are interested in watching can continue to watch on the existing link, but we don't know how long we'll be in closed session, so we can't give notice about when we will be back, but we will be back on the same link, I take it. I'm seeing nods. So for those who are watching, just stand by.
Thank you for that, Mayor Ireland. So having said that, we will indeed move in camera. Welcome back. We have returned from out of in-camera session, and I will refer to CO Given, please.
Thanks very much, Deputy Mayor Frechette. Administration is here with a recommendation that committee recommend council approve the purchase of 1249 Cabin Creek Drive for $355,000 as presented. The municipality owns 1251 Cabin Creek Drive. The residence on that site was destroyed in the 2024 wildfire. 1249 Cabin Creek Drive is directly adjacent, so neighboring 1251 Cabin Creek Drive. And it creates an opportunity for redevelopment on that site, utilizing the two parcels together. The property was evaluated using a land and asset acquisition framework that administration had previously developed with the assistance of outside consultants. The parcel 1249 that we're discussing achieved a score of 435 points out of a possible 500, identifying it as a high priority acquisition. It was identified that way because the site is zoning ready, serviced, already cleared of wildfire debris and has received its clearance from Parks Canada. And so it is able to support timely development. And of course, that adjacency being directly beside an already municipally owned property recommends it as a high priority. Administration has entered into discussions with the leaseholder of that property, and we have a negotiated proposed sale amount of $355,000 as I referenced. This obviously is connected to Council's priorities around facilitating development of diverse housing options to meet community needs and potentially leveraging the JMHC to increase the supply of below market housing. But obviously directly in alignment with Council's focus on increasing modest density where possible to ensure that we use the unfortunate opportunity presented by the wildfire to find some good community outcomes where possible. So administration recommends that committee administration is recommending that committee recommend council approve the purchase of 1249 Cabin Creek for $355,000. This is not a budgeted expense. The municipality does have a community housing reserve, which has adequate funds, has over, at year end 2026, will have over $560,000 in that reserve. Administration is recommending that the purchase can be accommodated within the use of that reserve, as there were no other forecasted uses of the reserve. I'm happy to answer any questions, but again, the simple version is that the adjacent parcel lease to a property owned by the municipality is available for sale. Administration recommends that it would be an important opportunity for the municipality to advance additional housing development in that area. We have a negotiated price and we have a funding source that doesn't require any taxpayer contributions.
Thank you, CEO Gibbon. We've had the discussion. Is there any further discussion? Councillor Melnick.
Deputy Mayor Frechette, I'm going to make the recommendation that committee recommend council approve the purchase of 1249 Cabin Creek Drive for $355,000 as presented.
Thank you. Any further discussion on the motion? All in favor? Opposed? That is carried. Moving on to item 8, the motion action list. I see no CEO Gibbon, sorry.
I'll be brief, Deputy Mayor Frechette, recognizing the time. So we have 2 recommended deferrals in terms of changing the timelines. The first is the Recovery Advisory Committee terms of reference. Administration's suggesting or requesting that committee approve deferring that to May 2026. We understand that the recovery transition framework hasn't yet been brought forward to council, and the committee is continuing to meet, so would look to bring something forward after the recovery transition framework comes forward. So we just need to ask to have that one pushed forward another month. The Royal Canadian Legion discussion, administration has been in discussion with the Legion. That is continuing to progress, and we forecast that we would have something to come forward to council in June of this year. So in consultation with Director Reid, he was requesting that be deferred to June. The Memorandum of Understanding item with respect to the Anglican and United Church lands, that was presented by Director Sanders today. So administration would suggest that that item could be deleted and it would be replaced with any other action that arose from there. And then finally, at the very bottom of the list, there was the item from just last week, the insurance deadline advertising. At that time, Council directed administration to undertake efforts to increase public awareness about the impending deadline. And as I think council members have seen and referred to during the meeting today, the municipality is undertaking additional effort through our social media channels, on our website, and through other rebuilding bulletins and other avenues that are available to us to do so. So from my perspective, administration is acting on that. We will continue to make efforts to increase awareness. I would suggest that this could come off the list because it is something we're actively doing. There's not going to be a follow-up report necessarily or any other sort of outcome. You gave us direction. We're acting on it. I think a few of you have acknowledged that you've seen that. We're going to continue to increase promotion around that. So I'd suggest that that item could also come off. So administration's suggestion would be those 2 date amendments and then the deletion of the Memorandum of Understanding from January 13th and the insurance deadline advertising from April 7th, because both are being acted on already.
Thank you, CEO Given. Councillor Hall.
I would make the motion that committee approve the updated motion action list as amended and speak briefly to the Recovery Advisory Committee terms of reference, which we spoke about yesterday at our meeting. We spoke about the future of the committee, and we all still see value in meeting, and as we move from acute phase of recovery into more long term, we will be looking at the terms of reference at our next meeting, making recommendations to council out of that.
Thank you. Any other councillors care to engage in discussion? Mayor Ireland.
I had a question, but it's not part of the debate. And I can wait. We can deal with the motion. If I can just come back to the motion action list after the vote, I'd be happy. I just have a question arising from one of the items.
Okay, very good. If there's no objection, we have the motion in front of us. Any further discussion? If not, I'll call the question. All in favor? Opposed? That's carried. Speak.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor Frechette. Just related to one of the changes concerning the Cenotaph and the Royal Canadian Legion. I know at budget time we allocated some funds just as a short-term measure in case that Cenotaph needed any immediate work. Has anything yet been required? Is there any chance that work will be needed before June? And are we comfortable with where things stand now so that the community doesn't lose that asset as we're stretching out the time it's going to take to come to agreement with the Legion?
Deputy Mayor Frechette, to Mayor Ireland's question, yes, administration is very comfortable. There's no impending disaster with respect to the infrastructure. I'm not aware that we had to spend any money over the course of the winter. And so administration is confident that there's no sort of immediate risk of losing the asset or of it crumbling and falling down between now and when we're proposing to bring forward some recommendations.
Thank you, CEO Gibbon. Moving on to item 9, councillor upcoming meetings. Any councillors got any meetings that are imminent? Councillor Melnick.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor Frechette. Appears I'll be busy on Thursday the 23rd. We have a Community Futures West Yellowhead board meeting that day, and in the afternoon, as part of the Emergency Advisory Committee, I'll be participating in the emergency management exercise that's been organized for that afternoon.
Thank you. Councillor Hall.
Thank you very much, Deputy Mayor Frechette. Although this isn't one of my assigned committees, I'll be joining the Biosphere Institute of the Bow Valley in Canmore on Monday to speak on a panel focused on wildfire prevention and response. I'll be sharing some personal reflections and experiences from the wildfire with the goal of contributing to the broader conversation around preparedness and resilience. So I'm really looking forward to that. I know this is upcoming meetings, but I did want to speak to our library board meeting we had last night. We spoke at length about Bill 28, which was introduced by the Government of Alberta on April 2nd. This bill proposes significant changes to the Libraries Act and does raise some concerns. Public libraries should be places of open access and diverse ideas, and any more movement towards more government influence over what's available feels like a step worth thinking very carefully about. I believe it undermines free speech and local decision making and the privacy of Albertans, and I encourage my council colleagues to look into that bill.
Thank you, Councillor Hall. I myself will be also attending the Community Futures meetings on the 23rd of April. And also on the 30th of April, I have a meeting with my Community in Bloom committee. Moving on to item 9.1, councillor appointments to boards and committees. I don't know who's speaking to that. CEO, do you know anything about that? Or Mayor Ireland?
It is not an item to be dealt with. It's part of the upcoming meetings, just as a reminder of who's been assigned to what committees. It doesn't require to be addressed.
Thank you for that clarity. Okay, item 10, upcoming events. We have the Jasper Pride and Ski Festival that's underway April 10th to 19th, Marmot Basin and in town events. We have the Jasper Park Chamber of Commerce General Meeting, 8 a.m. to 10 a.m., April 15th at O'Shea's Restaurant. We have the Mayor's Recognition Awards, 1:30 p.m., April 21st at our regular council meeting. We have the Wildfire Emergency Preparedness and Public Info Session at 7 p.m., April 29th at the Activity Center. And again, we have the Federation Canadian Municipalities Annual Conference, June 4th to 7th. Item 11, adjournment. Does anyone care to make the motion that the meeting adjourns? Okay. Mayor.
In the absence of any other interest by any other councillor, I will make the motion that we adjourn.
All in favor? Opposed? That is carried. Meeting is adjourned. Thank you all.